We are going to do a demo today on making a binder cover. And this is a demo on making, this is actually doesn't have the binder in it, but this is a really cool little project for your kids going off to school or making teacher gifts. I made these as teacher gifts one year for like all of my kids' teachers. And they're really great because you can customize them really easily. You can make them to fit any size binder, and they're washable. This is a pattern by Montgomery. I love her one sheet patterns for a number of reasons. When we talk about these patterns, I don't give you the measurements. I don't give you the exact details because I believe in copyright. And if you want to make a project, you need to buy a pattern. The beauty of it is it's a $2.50 pattern. And I did kits too, so that we can make this super easy. So basically what I'm going to do is we're going to go through kind of the process of how Karen made her binder cover, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks to make it easier. And there's a couple of things that I do just slightly different than what Karen does. Neither way is right. It's just the way that I prefer to do it. So I'm going to show you those things too. The pattern has you quilt a piece of fabric. She gives you the measurements. She has you quilt a piece of fabric with just batting on one side. So you can use batting, you can use fusible fleece, you can use a fusible batting, you can spray batting with 505 spray. However you want to get to where this piece of fabric is quilted to the batting, you go for it. My personal favorite way to do it is two-sided fusible fleece with a fabric on the back. So, and the reason for that is this. I think it makes it more washable. So this is the inside of the one that I made this weekend, and I did it exactly according to the instructions. And you can see the batting on the inside, which is fine. And you could wash this because I've quilted it pretty close together, and this is wool batting that's in here. You could wash this if you wanted to. But if you wanted to make it a little bit more durable and easy to be washed multiple times, I would probably be inclined to use not only a fusible fleece, but to actually put a backing fabric on. So the kits we're going to talk about today will have a backing fabric. It'll probably just be muslin. So what I did was I just did a big, just loose quilting design. Okay, this is not measured. This is not even. It's not even straight. But honestly, you can't tell all those things when you get to the top of this. Okay. So a couple of tips. What I did was I took my piece of fabric, and this is with the fabric, and I quilted like every couple of inches or maybe every inch and a half all the way across the long side of the fabric. I fused both the top and the back because this is two-sided fusible fleece. Then for your first tip, I quilted right down the middle of the fabric, and then I came a little bit this way and a little bit that way and a little bit this way and a little bit that way until I had about 6 rows of quilting the long way. Now that really stabilizes your fabric. Once I quilted both directions, I then went and ironed it with steam. So I steamed everything, because what happens is it doesn't matter how well you fuse it, it doesn't matter how well you baste it, it doesn't matter how well you spray it. When you quilt it, it will slightly pucker just a little bit because fabric is fluid and it's going to move a little bit with the feed dogs, right? So I went and steamed this with my steam iron. Then I came back, actually about 15 minutes ago, I came back and quilted the other direction. So since this way was already really stabilized, I started on one end over here and I stitched up, and I actually stitched off the fabric and came over and came back down and off the fabric and back up, and I did that all the way across. Okay, it took me about 3 minutes. Now we're going to cut this down based on the measurements of the pattern. Now what I have is a big piece of quilted fabric. This is just a binder that I had laying around. I'm going to take my binder and I'm going to put the fabric I want to see face sides up. Okay, I want to find the middle of my fabric, which is easy enough to do. And I'm going to put a couple of pins in. Okay, so we're just going to mark the middle of our fabric with pins. You just want to be able to see it off the top and the bottom. Now I'm going to lay my fabric right sides up. So this is the fabric I want to see on the outside. Here's my pin, and here's my pin. Now I'm going to take the middle of my binder Now here's where binders get weird, because you've got this section. You can just kind of eyeball this. You can even line it up with the fold if you want to. It doesn't really matter. Just kind of eyeball it and center your binder to the middle here. Then I'm going to take a couple more pins and I'm going to find where the end of my binder is with my pins. And again, these are just marking points. These are just for reference for when we do the next step. Now we've marked where the edge of our binder is. So we can take our binder away for now. I'm going to just trim up, I'm going to clean up these ends because I want to go and hem the edge of my fabric. I'm going to show you a couple of tips for doing that. Now essentially what we're going to do is we're going to take this quilted bit of fabric and we're going to make the pockets for the binder from the whole thing. Okay, so if our binder goes here, you just want to check and make sure. Okay, so this is a little bit too long. We're going to hem this in. The pattern gives you the length that you want, but you just want to make sure that your binder is going to stay in the middle. Now, I'm going to take this over to my machine and I'm going to hem this. This doesn't have to be perfect. But you don't want to have these raw edges, okay? So I'm just going to take this, I'm going to fold it in about 1/2 inch, and I'm going to hem this down with my machine really quick, okay? So essentially what you have by marking these pins is you know that this, between this pin and this pin, is the front of your book. So if you want to go and do any embellishing, you do that here in the front of this book, okay? For the sake of today's video, we are simply going to add a pocket. So I followed the pattern's directions. Snip these corners off. Don't snip them too small. Snip the corners just a little bit off of there, okay? Hemostats are one of my absolute favorite sewing tools. So I will take hemostats, put them inside the thing I want to turn. I open them, put it up there in the pocket and open them. See that open? Put my fingernail inside the hemostats, take my fingernail out, and then lock it. Hear it? Okay, so it's locked. Then I'm going to pull this right way out. That is so much easier for me than finding the corner and wiggling it around and all that stuff, right? So I'm going to go to the other side. I'm going to poke it in, pull that point out too. Okay, so now I have very quickly turned this pocket box. And my corners are kind of already poked out. Okay, so now I'm going to take my point-to-point turner and I'm just going to run it around the edges of the seams so that I can poke those corners out. So we have, since we trimmed away that extra fabric, look at how pokey our corners are. Okay, so we're going to poke all these corners out and then I'm going to go press this. When you press it, you want to make sure that you're getting as square as you can. This is another really good time to use steam because the steam will make all the fibers relax and then you will get a much flatter piece of fabric. Okay, so I have a really nice square pocket piece. The pocket piece is going to get attached to my space that is not between the two pins. And you'll see why in a second. I want to make sure that where my opening is, so here's where my turning opening was, is on the bottom. I want to make sure that it's within this pin and the end. Okay, and I'm just going to center that a little bit. I'm going to pin it on. So we're just going to take and we're going to top stitch from here down the sides and back up to the top. Make sure you back stitch here and here because this is a pocket, so this is where it's going to get pulled on. Next, what we need to do is we need to take all of the pieces and we're going to take and look at where everything folds. So we know that our binder is going to fit here because that's where the pins are, and it's going to fit here because that's where the pins are. Now what we have is this weird sort of top section, right? So this is a good time to use your clover clips and hold everything in place. I've already taken the binding part of our project and I'm going to put it over the edges here. Okay, so here's another little bit of something that I did slightly different than what Karen did. I'm going to pin this in place. I pin it both through the quilted layers as well as a couple of pins here in the middle because you really don't want this to wiggle when you sew it. Okay, now I'm going to do that for the top and I'm going to do it for the bottom, and then I'm going to take this to my machine and I'm going to sew from here to here, and I'm going to backstitch both of those pieces. I'm going to do that on the top and I'm going to do that on the bottom. This one I did not have the other fabric in. Remember, it's just batting. This is where I want to show you the comparisons. So this one has batting on the inside, this one is lined. So when I top stitched these pieces, the thing I did slightly differently. So now this is how it's sitting, right? So you have your raw edges are here, you sew both sides, you flip this. When you flip this the right way out so that all the pretty things are on the outside, what happens is that little bit of binding that you did up at the top becomes sort of like a book binding. So what we have is, here's our pocket, because when we folded this over, we've got a pocket. This is your binding piece, so that when you flip this over, the thing I did a little bit differently that Karen didn't do in her pattern was I just went ahead and top stitched this a little bit. Otherwise it folds a little bit loose. And again, that's okay. I just like that this is a little bit cleaner version. Then what you have is this groovy little thing that your binder book's going to fit in. Okay. Now here's the tip to get this onto this, because it's a little awkward. Slide your binder in about 3 inches this way, then fold it up. Don't put it all the way in there. Okay. And then put the other side in a couple 3 inches. And then you can just sort of slide it on like a pillowcase. Okay. And it really does kind of just, it all just fits together like magic. When you open your binder and you get it all pushed up to the sides, look at how pretty this is. So it's a little inside out and backwards, but that's okay, because once you get it all put together, and those, I think those couple of extra tips will really help. What I did with this one is, remember when I said you have your pin here and your pin here, and this is the place you can decorate it? This is literally just a piece of fabric that I turned the ends under. I 505 sprayed it to the outside, and then I top stitched it. And then I top stitched a piece of ribbon on top. And then I did the same thing on the back. This is just a piece of peppered cotton that I used a decorative stitch and some crocheted lace on it. So you can embellish these any old way you want. You could do embroidery on here. You could write your name on here. You could figure out where the spine is and write on the spine what's in your book. The pattern is written so that you can make this for any size binder.